Two. Hey there, Modern Math Teacher. I'm Krista Moore, your host here on the Modern Math Teacher podcast. And today I am crazy excited to bring a guest on to speak with us all about how we can support our most vulnerable students. It is going to be an incredible, controversial conversation, and I cannot wait for you to hear it. Today, I'm here with Juliana Tapper. She is the inventor of MathWars, the founder of Collaborate Ed Consulting, and the author of a brand new book, Teaching 612 Math Intervention, a practical framework to engage our students who struggle. Juliana has extensive background as an experienced math classroom teacher, a PLC facilitator, an instructional coach, and a professional developer with a lot of urban classroom experience in multiple states. And if you don't know, she is an NCTM and NCSM speaker where she and I just got to hang out in real life this past week in Chicago. So welcome, Juliana, to the show.
Yay! Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. And it was so fun to meet in real life and hang out, go to lunch, crash some textbook parties. It was wonderful.
Oh my gosh, yeah. If you have not been to NCTM, it is a financial commitment, I will say that, but it is totally worthwhile. The amazing people you get to meet and the ideas you get to share and be inspired by are second to none. And that's what brought me to bring Juliana on today. She had an incredible session all about supporting our students. She actually talked about mastery-based grading, but today we're going to talk about one of my other favorite ways to engage our students, because as we were there and we were chatting over lunch, we discovered that direct instruction is a pretty hot topic and is pretty controversial. So we're here to talk about the best way to do that because Juliana has nailed it in her classroom. Okay, so let's just give it a little bit of background about you, Juliana. You've had a big journey from teaching in the classroom to now, you've got your own company, you're writing a book. Can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to create MathWars, which is the direct instruction method we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah. So I had started my teaching experience. I was teaching high school math intervention and high school algebra 1 in South Central Los Angeles. I actually did my student teaching at Compton High School. And then I moved into my first year of teaching at a charter school in South Central Los Angeles. And, I had just experienced, I decided to teach the way I had experienced math. I had grown up in about, 20 miles west of South Central in Santa Monica. And, I realized I grew up incredibly privileged, and I went to a high school, that's pretty good high school. And I would sit there, we'd do homework review. We'd get kind of 20 minutes of lesson, that 20 minutes of I do. Then we'd have the 20 minutes of we do, like work on a worksheet for 20 minutes. And then they'd assign the homework, and you can start it in class early or you take it home and work on it at home. And that's what I had experienced as a math student. And so I just figured, okay, that's what I'll do. I wanted to be in historically underserved communities. So, I was exactly where I wanted to be. There was no surprise there. But when I actually had my first classroom in Watts, I was just like, oh my gosh, I remember the third day of school, I wanted to quit. I was like, this is not good. No one is getting anything done. I actually, when I was writing the book, Teaching 612 Math Intervention, I actually found a clip from my first year, that I submitted to grad school of me teaching. I shared this story in the book. And I laughed for an hour. After I saw that clip of my first year of teaching, there were a little 7-minute clip of direct instruction. In that 7 minutes, I asked 27 questions of my kids, which is pretty good. From a formative assessment standpoint, I was pretty proud that I asked so many questions, but I do what so many of us do. And I was asking a question to the whole class, expecting a choral response. And when I actually looked at the footage, one student shouted the answer 12 times.
And that happens all the time. That's for sure what I experienced back when I, was a student. And then when I first started teaching too, I feel you there.
Yeah. And so that was kind of what my first year was like, a very common experience for all of us. But I had like a very supportive grad school cohort. I had super supportive coworkers that like believed in me and believed I should be a math teacher even when I was like, I'm not sure I have any business doing this. They like were super supportive. Just everyone in my life at that time was very supportive. And so I don't know exactly what it was that like spurred the idea for Math Wars, but it was kind of just like one little tweak, and all of a sudden like my second year was like just so dramatically different. Like it was incredible.
Yes. That's amazing. Yeah. So, there's a whole bunch of debate about what is the best teaching approach. We know things like building thinking classrooms and the inquiry model are really popular. I talk about project based learning all the time. And what I love about Math Wars is that you've come up with this like gamified way of doing direct instruction that is super impactful. But why do you think, in general, like direct instruction gets a bad rep?
I think it gets a bad rep because we take it to mean like the 20 minutes of I do, the 20 minutes of we do, the 20 minutes of you do. And, I know firsthand from my very own classroom, like that was not effective. Like it was chaos. It was shouting answers. It was hoping for a choral response and getting the
Hmm.
same kid participating the whole time. It was off task behavior. I got cussed out by students. I cried in the middle of class.
Oh,
Like
no.
it was like not good, like, and
No.
so that 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, I think is what gives direct instruction, explicit instruction, gradual release, whatever you want to call it. That's what gives it a bad rep. But in reality, like we can make a few small tweaks and really have some more effective, I love how you've been saying gamified, direct instruction. And I think, in this world of building thinking classrooms, in this world of PBL, in this world of inquiry based, like I was nervous to bring this up to you when we were having lunch in Chicago together, because I do believe that some explicit instruction is important for our kids who are struggling, who are multiple years behind in math.
Yeah.
I think it is important to have some explicit instruction, and I feel like I'm like the black sheep for wanting to say that. But it was helpful. Like I've had conversations with you. I had a wonderful conversation with Juliana Tapper on her Solving for the Undefined podcast,
Oh, yeah.
and she is also a big proponent of building thinking classrooms. And I said, in that conversation, we also talked about, is there a place for explicit instruction? She said, oh yeah, I definitely still do explicit instruction. And I was so surprised when we were chatting that you were also like, yeah, no, like there is a place for Math Wars. And like you took my Math Wars method workshop years ago now. And like, so
Mhm.
I know that you know exactly what it is. And the fact that you feel there is a place for it, I think we tend to think of, like, my classroom has to be 100% inquiry based, 100% building thinking classrooms, 100% project based learning, or it has to be 100% direct instruction. But what if we like kind of came in the middle a little bit? And what if we did like really pique students' interest with an inquiry based, problem based lesson,
Mm.
did some building thinking classrooms, and then maybe the next day we do a little bit of an explicit lesson to just catch them up a little bit faster. Like we can
Yeah.
go back and forth between the two methods. I don't think, and as I kind of like move through sharing the Math Wars method and sharing this idea about explicit instruction, I realize I did that all the time. I
Yeah.
always, I did leave the classroom before building thinking classrooms came out, but I did have experience with illustrative mathematics. That was like just super
Oh,
popular as I
yeah.
was leaving the classroom. And so I did illustrative mathematics tasks with my kids all the time to
Right.
get them interested, to get them thinking about the math that we were then going to learn. Like I had
Yeah.
students who had failed math every single year of middle school, but I believe in teaching grade level content, so I was still teaching them algebra 1 or integrated math 1.
Mhm.
So I did use, Math Wars to get us caught up quicker.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that is so true. I have always said, like, not every standard needs a project. And so, what you're saying there with like, you've got to blend these approaches completely resonates with me. I'll go do trainings with people and they're like, well, how do I teach like polynomials with PBL? And I'm like, you don't. That's a terrible way to introduce polynomial arithmetic. We've got to do some direct instruction, some good basic practice with that. And then maybe you'll apply it in a project. But I would never teach a kid how to do polynomial division by throwing a project at them. That just sounds awful. And so you've got to have this great balance of approaches. And you're right. I think a lot of the inquiry tasks, whether it's illustrative mathematics or, a building thinking classroom task. They're great for piquing interest. And like 3-act tasks did that back in the day. Make
Yep.
math moments. Like everyone's got some good inquiry to kick it off. But there is a time and a place for this direct instruction. And I saw that especially with my students when I'm introducing something like, like polynomial arithmetic or factoring for the first time, or a lot of times with my intervention courses, when I introduced that Math Wars way of doing direct instruction, it was different from what they were seeing in their former math classrooms that they dreaded, that they hated, which is maybe why they're already below grade level, right? Like they weren't getting
Yes.
the best math experience. And so giving them this supportive directed instruction in the new way, in the way that I learned in your Math Wars model, was so impactful for them because they got to find those successes early on. And it wasn't 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. It was one
Yes.
great session together that was like a back and forth with them. And you could see their thinking just kind of grow from there.
Yes.
So, okay, so we've both said Math Wars, I don't know, 10 times, 15
Yeah.
times in the last 10 minutes. But I don't think that all of my audience is familiar with what the Math Wars method is. So it's something I love, and I'll link for more information here. But can you give us just kind of a synopsis? What is Math Wars?
Yes. So it's also detailed in, extreme detail in my book, Teaching 612 Math Intervention. Like it is chapter 6. And so anyone interested in learning more about it, pre-order the book, order the book and read chapter 6 because that is the Math Wars method from start to finish.
Love
Um,
it.
and why it's called Math Wars, I feel like I should start there. I
Ah,
used to be, I feel like I've kind of fallen off a little bit, but like I used to be a really big Star Wars fan and I literally just like wanted a way to show a Star Wars clip to my kids. And so
love
I
that.
named this like method the Math Wars method. Like that is literally where it comes from.
That's amazing.
But instead of thinking of gradual release as 20 minutes I do, 20 minutes we do, 20 minutes you do,
Hmm.
what it does is there's 3 steps. So the first step is planning, like how we're going to plan in the Math Wars method style. And you want to come up with multiple chunks of content. Maybe you get through 2, 3, 4 chunks of content in a
Hmm.
period. And these are like very, very similar examples. And we're going to come up with 4 questions for each one of these chunks. So, if
Okay.
I'm doing 2-step equations, like I don't want to do like ones with fractions and then ones without fractions as part of the same chunk. I want those to be
Sure.
2 different chunks.
Okay. Okay.
And so that's kind of the first part. The second part is that you want really like low, visually overwhelming student notes. So I like to tell teachers fold up a piece of paper into 8 boxes, and then we're just going to go one problem at a time, one, two, three,
Hmm.
four, all the way through. And then the Math Wars method itself is how we actually teach those lessons and create accountability, create built-in checks for understanding, create informal formative assessment, create authentic collaboration in sort of this, like you say, like sort of a gamified approach where we're going to model a question. So instead of 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, it's one question I do, one question we do, and then 2 questions you do as a team. And
Yeah.
so instead of it, just taking those chunks, like we're gradually releasing each chunk at a time.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it just makes for this like really, again, like super engaged, super like full of formative feedback and checks for understanding, because that's what our kids need who are multiple grade levels behind. We need to catch the gap that day, not in 2 weeks when
Hmm.
we give the quiz. And
Yeah.
Math Wars method like has that built in a really fun way.
Yeah, no, it is super fun. I love what you mentioned about having to put it into 4, however many chunks it is that you're doing. I did typically find in my block classes, I could do 3 to 4, and it would still lead for great engagement with my students. But my students really loved the whole, like, they liked listening to me verbalize what it was that I was doing as I'm going through and solving that process. So, verbalizing the procedures. And then as I would call on them for that we do, they would tell me what the next step was, and I would help put math language to that, saying,
Yes.
we're doing the inverse operation. You're right. And so we're doing that here. So they're getting that solidified. And then they knew the you do was on them. But what they loved was that they got to thought partner with it. So in the you do, it, as Juliana said, it is a team effort. So you get to work on the problem, you solve it independently, and then you check it with your team. And I can call on any random person from that team for the answer. So it got my students engaged in that math discourse that we want them doing. It got them using the academic vocabulary. It got them practicing the procedures. All of this at the same time while we're engaged in quote unquote direct instruction time. So
Yes.
it's super engaging.
Yeah, people are always asking me, "So is this the notes or is this the practice?" And I was like, "Yes."
Yes.
Like it is both. Like, number 1 is the notes, but number 2, 3, and 4 are the practice. So, a lot of administrators are like, "I only want to see you talking for, no more than 7 minutes, and then I want the kids working for 15 minutes," or whatever it is. And like Math Wars holds that balance because it's like I'm doing direct instruction for one question, and then I am like formatively assessing and checking for understanding for the next 3 questions. And so it holds that ratio that administrators want to see in
Yeah.
their walkthroughs, and it releases the control to the students to be working on it and to be growing their confidence in their ability to do math together.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've had administrators walk in while I'm doing it and they're like, oh, I love that they get to earn points and they're excited to like get 2 points on the board or 1 point for confirming. And so it's just this super fun, interactive way to approach direct instruction. And so I've used it in my intervention classes, but I've also used it in, my traditional grade level classes. And it doesn't matter who it is. This direct instruction, depending on the topic, is super important for your students to just get that good procedural foundation so they can do some of those more advanced, higher order thinking skills with the procedures, and the procedures aren't going to limit them then.
I really appreciate you saying that because I think so many times when I'm like, oh, I like a I do, we do, you do, but in the Math Wars style, they're like, what about, oh, you do, we do, I do, like going backwards. And I'm like, sure, okay. But like, I don't know. I'm always used to teaching kids that have a lot of grade levels to catch up
Yeah.
on. Like, I find it a lot faster to just be like, all right, I'm going to like, let's just learn it. And then now let's manipulate it with a task. Now let's manipulate it with a project. But like, let's boost your confidence with this like structured, explicit teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like going back to how we chunk it into the different sections. As your students are starting to catch on, they can start kind of going through that teacher led model ahead of you. And so I tell my students, I'm like, hey, if you think if you've done really well in the last section and you think you know what to do, you go ahead and try this ahead of me, but I'm going to walk through it with everybody. And so I'd give students maybe like a 30-second head start. I'm like, okay, if you think you got this, 30 seconds, you get going. Otherwise, just copy the problem down and I'm going to guide you through it in just a minute. And so my students who were starting to get it got that like instant validation, like, oh my gosh, I did it right. I know how to take this and move it to this next level that, they wouldn't get if I'm just sitting there doing 4 different examples with them and they haven't had a chance to independently practice it on their own or like get that good feedback from me.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I feel like that is another place where explicit instruction really gets that bad reputation
Yeah.
because we do like I truly do believe like my students are capable of thinking of math on their own. I do believe that they are capable thinkers and doers of math. And so I think explicit instruction is sometimes like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. You have to do it this way or you're wrong.
Mhm.
We all have those stories of teachers that were like, well, I solved it differently. I got the right answer, but I solved it differently and they still marked it wrong. Like,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
don't do that. Like, please honor all students thinking,
Yeah.
like I don't care. Like if the student is making sound mathematical decisions, like solve it however you want by all means.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to be here to model it the way like my brain is making sense of it and like hopefully help ease it for you. But if
Oh,
you
yeah.
think of it a different way, I want to celebrate that, and so I think that is another thing with explicit instruction. Make sure that we're always making it that we're always being a very approving and validating of alternative methods. It doesn't have to be
Mhm.
how we model it. Like it's okay if a kid solves it a different way.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I really appreciated about the you do with your team, right? So they do it 2 times. And maybe, the first time they try solving it one way and they all have to figure out if they have the same answer. And if they don't, or even if they do, they kind of share out the methods that they use to get there. So you're still getting that really good like sample of different strategies to use just in a more like localized way. It's not, up at the whiteboards or we're not calling attention to all of them, but students still get a chance to view that and see it. And then sometimes, when we're doing the we do, a student will take me in a direction that another student wouldn't have. And they're like, well, wait, Miss Moore, I solved it this way, but I got the same answer. I'm like, that's amazing. I love that you solved it a different way.
Exactly, like when we're solving multi-step equations with, like, variables on both sides,
Mhm.
there are
Oh,
4
always.
different places to start that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I can start by moving the inverse of any single one of those terms, and
Mhm.
so it's like, can I validate, like, in that we do time, like, say, is there another place I could start? Is there another place I could start? Is there another and, like, validate them all along the way that, like, they're probably thinking about it correctly and, like,
Yeah.
validate that from the start.
Right? And that just, raises their student status. They're feeling that more confidence in the classroom. I know, like, with my students when they were doing math wars, it didn't only just give them like the skills that they needed, but it gave them that sense of like achievement that they didn't really get doing that traditional 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. They liked that sense of accomplishment they had if they had the right answer and they helped their team get it. No matter how they got it or who got to share the answer, they were like, yes, I had 13 also, and it didn't matter. Like, we both had 13 and we did it and we're winning, or we get 2 points this time. So it's just awesome.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up like that idea of student status as well. Like I didn't learn about that until I read Pam Sada's book Choosing to
Hmm.
See, where she talks a lot about elevating student status and
Yeah.
the importance of that. And when we're in a classroom full of students who struggle, just like my example from my video of my first year of teaching, one kid shouted the answer 12 times. That is elevating his status, but
Yeah.
everyone else's status is like getting lower and lower on every single question. And Math Wars does utilize like a cold calling structure where you're going to
Uh,
randomly be calling on kids, which is
hmm.
another like, talk about controversial topics. That's another one.
Right.
Um, but kind of aside from that, it does use that. And so,
Yeah.
but the importance of that is that every single kid builds their status in your classroom because every single kid is asked a question and you
Hmm.
scaffold it back until they can answer. So every single kid gives you an answer as well. And so it elevates everyone's status in this classroom. You don't have the one student shouting the answer 12 times at you.
Yeah. No, I love that you said that because as soon as we were talking, I was like, I have to bring in a second controversial topic. Yes. Juliana and I both believe that cold calling is okay in the classroom. Friends, mic drop, we said it. You can do it, but you do have to have a good classroom rapport first. Like, there are some safety nets you need to put into place. Okay. So we'll give you guys that. We'll give you that caveat. But now in my classrooms, my students know I use Class Dojo for like everything these days because I can do my random groups of three. Everyone goes to the whiteboards, or I can do a random name caller, and they know that I could randomly call on them at any time. But here's the thing: they've got that built-in sense of security because they're working with their table team first, validating their answer, and if they share an answer and it's not correct, it was not correct for all four of them, right? So it's not just that
Exactly.
one student, it was the team. So it doesn't do anything to their individual status. It's like, oh, shoot, we had a misconception. And so then it's just a great time to explore. But because everyone's got that confidence of like, hey, our answer is 13, that's what we're locking in, they can share that confidently. And that's going to raise their status automatically.
Exactly, exactly. And I will say that like a lot of times cold call does more harm than good with kids when we use it as like a gotcha.
Yes.
If you are not like you use your Class Dojo app, I use index cards with student names. You can use popsicle sticks. It's something
Mm-hmm.
that the kids trust is truly random.
Yeah.
As opposed to a lot of teachers will think they're good at randomly calling on kids, but you're actually just calling on the kids who you want to get in trouble and you
Yeah.
want to say you need to pay more attention or whatever it is, and that's not the purpose of cold call. The purpose
No.
is not to catch cold kids disengaging. The purpose is to formatively check for understanding
Mm-hmm.
about if a random sampling of kids can tell you what's going on in your class, that should give you so much confidence that your kids are getting it. But if
Yeah.
you randomly call in a student and they don't know the answer or they get the answer wrong, that's also great formative feedback for you that maybe there is some misconception going on, and you find out right then in the moment. But it should be truly random, visibly random for the kids to
Mm-hmm.
see, and it should never be to get someone in trouble. It should
Yeah.
always be that you're going to be willing to stick with that kid until they're able to give you some sort of answer so that they feel success in your classroom. It's never like, no, that was wrong, move on to the next kid in the step. You
Mhm.
work with that kid until they have success.
Yes, absolutely. I love that caveat. So, okay, again, guys, cold calling, you do have to have a safe and welcoming atmosphere in your classroom first. And don't do it punitively. It is not a gotcha. A really safe strategy to start implementing this, if you want to get a groundwork for it, is that math wars method, because again, they've got that safety in numbers. It's not just their answer that they're doing, it is their team's answer. And if you're not doing math wars for a lesson, then give your kids a chance for a turn and talk to validate their answer with somebody else first. Okay. So
Yes.
cold calling can be effective if done appropriately. We'll put that little
Yes.
asterisk on there. Appease everybody else. Okay, so I love this. What do you think like the future of math instruction is going to look like? Is there room for this more flexible approach where direct instruction, inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, gamification, all of this can coexist?
Yeah, I think like teachers need to have more autonomy to be able to choose what is best for their kids.
Mm,
In the book Teaching 612 Math Intervention, I even write about like the difference between like I feel like a lot of us are saying that we want math equity, but we're
mhm.
actually pushing for equality. We're actually pushing that like everyone should be in a building thinking classroom. Everyone should be doing all these things all the time. But
Yeah,
actually, that's the same for everyone. I do believe like teachers know their kids the best, and we should be able to have some more autonomy. That if we are truly wanting math equity, we should be able to choose what our classes need, what our students need in
yes,
order to get them where they need to be. So if your class is thriving, like I do think like the inquiry base, like whenever students can have that experience, they should have it for sure.
yeah,
But I also know the realities of teaching students who have struggled with math and failed math for multiple years. And it's hard just to get started. And
yes,
so I think like we should be able to, as teachers, make that decision for ourselves, for our own classrooms. Maybe our intervention class needs more explicit instruction than our regular class. Like
sure.
whatever it is, we should be able to make that decision. And I hope that it moves less from like 100% one way or 100% the other and more shades of gray, more like
Mhm,
when it's the right fit, do what's best for your kids. And like here is a explicit instructional method that is
mhm.
more effective than the 20 minutes 20 minutes 20 minutes, but you will still feel like you're doing explicit instruction. So like let's just do
Yeah.
it better.
Yeah, absolutely. I love everything that you are saying there. I also agree 100%. We should be able to blend what we're doing, and our teachers are the experts in the room. So that like leads me on this little, brainworm down to AI. I know teachers are all concerned that AI is going to replace them and all these things. But guys, you are the expert of your students and your content, and so you get to make those pedagogical moves that are best going to support your learners, which is, the important role of a teacher that you'll never be able to replace no matter what.
Exactly. And it's not always about like AI feeds off of data. And
Mhm.
honestly, it's not always about data. Sometimes my kids are just bad test takers, but they know the
Yeah.
information. Like I'm going to know that about my kids more than like if it were to truly just rely on the data that feeds the AI that's making the instructional decisions for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's circle back to math wars and these amazing methods. You've got your new book coming out, Teaching 612 Math Intervention, and it lays a framework for engaging students who struggle with a bunch of different strategies. Can you give us a preview of some of like the other key strategies outside of math wars that teachers can start to use in their classrooms and what they can expect to find in your book?
Yes, and so it's called the Break It Math Intervention Framework because we're going to be working to break the gatekeeping cycles of mathematics, which I talk about in chapter 1, so I kind of set that up. And
Love
then
it.
the rest of the book is going through the framework. So step 1 is the B, which stands for build community. So like we've already mentioned, before we do cold calling, before you do math wars, even if you're thinking like, "Oh, great, I listened to the podcast episode, I'm ready to do math wars," like we have to build community first. Like it's supposed to be a framework that you go 5 steps in a row, and so
Okay,
we
perfect.
all have to start at building community. And it's not I think as high school teachers a lot, like when I hear building community, I think of like, so you want me to have a birthday wall on my wall, you want me to like do more student surveys and ask them what their dream car is, and it's not that. Building
No.
community to break gatekeeping cycles is about intentionally helping students to express and overcome math anxiety, math trauma,
Mhm.
so that they can build a positive relationship with math in your classroom. So we all have to start there. It is not, I'm not going to ask you to do class bingo. I love class
Yeah.
bingo. I love all these things, right? But like, that's not what I'm going to ask you to do in the building community chapter. So that
Okay.
it's about intentional community for students who struggle to feel safe so that you can do things like math wars.
Love it.
Yeah, so that's the B. Then the next step, step 2, is the R, which are routines to boost confidence. So those are some tried and true favorites that I know you love, like which one doesn't belong, same and
Yes.
different, would you rather.
Mm-hmm.
There's 6 of them in there. They all focus on reasoning. They
Mm-hmm.
all can be introduced without math to keep that math anxiety low. And they
Love.
all have multiple correct answers. So those are the 3 things. So I give you the 6 of them, ideas about how to, like a whole facilitator guide. So it's everything you need to help boost confidence, like with those 6 routines that you can do as a warm up. Like takes 5 minutes to start your period. Then the next one, so we've had B, we've had R, now is E, is step 3. That is engage every student. That is the Math Wars method. So
Yeah.
that is
Chapter
it right
3,
there.
step 3.
Yep. Exactly. Then we have BREA, is advance your expectations, which is
Ooh.
all about my just-in-time math intervention model, where I set the stage for just-in-time versus just-in-case interventions, and
Okay.
how we need to be providing just-in-time supports to our students instead of a just-in-case intervention. So all sorts of good stuff. Also get into the fluency discussion there. So
Okay.
controversial topic number 3, all about fluency is in that chapter, advance your expectations, and sort of like, great, okay, you want me to have high grade level expectations of all students, but my kids can't multiply. Like, tell me, lady, how do I do this? And so we talk about that in that chapter as well. And then the
Awesome.
last one, so we have BREA, and our last letter is K, which is know students' level of understanding, which is the mastery based framework. And so that was what I did for NCTM. I know you've taken my workshop on rethinking
Mm-hmm.
math assessment. And so I just go through that framework in
Amazing.
that chapter, how to identify your question levels, everything about switching to a mastery based approach, which I believe is truly that last piece to motivating your kids who struggle, is having their perseverance, having their effort reflected accurately in their grade that's what's going to
Yes.
yield you the motivation that you want from your students. And we have to think about adjusting our assessment practices,
Yeah.
which is like super personal decision to think
Oh,
about
yeah.
and talk about, but
Mm-hmm.
it's there as an offering about if you really want to boost that student motivation. I do believe assessment practices need to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talk about all different ways of implementing mastery-based assessment on the podcast. So friends, if you are
Yes.
interested in that, I'll link a podcast playlist that has all different aspects of mastery-based grading, because I absolutely agree with Juliana on that. And in fact, I gave my kids what I call Mastery Check Monday, which is the same type of 5 questions that Juliana would do in her formative assessment Fridays. So you
Yes.
can see we like a bunch of the same things, even though we have 2 very different backgrounds in teaching math, and 2 different, groups of students that we've worked with. And I love that. So you're teaching 612 math intervention book, you guys. These 6 steps, 5 steps,
5 steps.
BREAK. Okay, 5 steps. These 5 steps obviously support our students who struggle and is a great read for our intervention teachers. But honestly, you guys, every teacher, every single math teacher can benefit from reading this, because even if you only teach your, on grade level courses, you're going to have those classes where you have students who struggle for a variety of reasons. And all 5 of these methods are going to help, boost student confidence, beat down that math trauma. They're going to gain their math status. They're going to find success in your class. There's just so many positives that come out of this book. So I know that I'm really looking forward to reading it. I'm meeting with my math team on Wednesday, and so I'm going to share that this is coming out. So Juliana, can you let my listeners know, like, how can we get our hands on your book, and when can we expect it to drop so we can all binge read it together?
Yes, that sounds wonderful. So you can go to Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, bookshop.org, just search Teaching 612 Math Intervention and it'll pop up. Or you can learn about all the bonuses that I'm offering for teachers
Ooh,
that do trust me with a pre-order. You
yeah.
can go to gatebreakerbook.com because we're going to become gate breakers. We're going to break these gatekeeping cycles of mathematics together. So if you go to gatebreakerbook.com, that is going to have all my bonuses listed for
Yes.
you. You get, and since we've talked about Math Wars so much, I'll just give a spoiler alert. If you pre-order the book, you get immediate access to the full Math Wars method workshop. The one
That's
that Kristen took, like you get
yes.
immediate, you don't have to wait for the book. You can pre-order and you can watch the 90-minute workshop today. As
So
soon as you
good.
pre-order the book, there's so many, like I'm doing live trainings all throughout the pre-order period because it will not ship until December 30th.
Okay.
So, to say thank you for trusting me with a pre-order, I have like, it is like literally over $450 of bonuses that you
Oh
get.
my
Like as soon
gosh.
as you pre-order, you just register your pre-order on that website, gatebreakerbook.com, and you get access to it all immediately.
Oh, you are so generous, and I am so excited, guys. This is going to be an amazing read for the new year. Juliana, it has been such a delight to chat with you in person in Chicago last week, and then to have you on today to talk about how we can support all of our students. I love that we hit on 3 different controversial topics all in one conversation.
Yes.
But honestly, you guys, there's like they say, there's room for everybody on the playground. There's room for all of the different methods. When you blend them, you're going to support all of your students. And that's what I
Yes.
love
I
so
could
much.
not agree more.
Awesome. All right, Juliana. Well, thank you so much for being on here today. Everybody, I'm going to make sure that all of the links we mentioned today are in the show notes here. Gatebreakerbook.com is where we are all going to go rush, pre-order Juliana's book, and then get those bonuses because now I know you are all really interested in that Math Wars method. So if you pre-order and then go into our Facebook group, let me know that you're in the Math Wars method. Hit me up in the DMs. I would love to see how you're enjoying the program as well and what success you find in your classroom today.
Thank
Awesome.
you so
All right,
much.
Juliana. Yeah, thanks so much. All right, you guys, until next time, everybody, keep it real.